And we're back. Aren't we back? Applause is always welcome. Thank you. Who's glad to be back? That's a lot of people not sure. I'm taking that personally. Thank you for coming back. This is fantastic. Lunch good? Everyone like lunch? Yeah? Get some nods. That's all good. That's a good start. Right. Networking question. Who said they were going to talk to someone random? Put your hand up if you said you were going to talk to someone random. Keep your hand up if you actually did. Oh, that's very impressive. Very impressive. Very impressive. I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right. So, who's feeling, you've got fuel, you've got some food. Is anyone feeling a bit interactive, a little bit lively? This is when the British all go, oh, no, not me. Well, there is going to be Q&A in the afternoon session, so you're going to get an opportunity to ask questions for some of the panel discussions, some of the fireside chats. So just giving you a pre-warning, if you do have a question, we will have the opportunity to do that as we go along. Sound good? Silence. Sound good? Way, there we go. We've got to get the energy levels back up, so thank you very much for that. So with that, it's my enormous pleasure to introduce our next session. We're going to address prominence and providence, a very critical topic in the current environment. And to lead that session, I'm going to welcome back Ian Munford and his panel. So please give a warm welcome to Ian and the panel.
Me again, and hopefully, as Simon said, you've been fed, nourished, and your energy levels are back up and ready to go. In this session, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here with us, we're going to, as Simon said, look at quite a pithy topic, which is around the prominence and providence of news. And quite frankly, I can't think of a more important or urgent topic for us to cover. And I'm going to be joined very shortly by a company that will not need any introduction to anyone in this room because they're in our lives daily, and that's our colleagues from ITN. And look, ITN isn't just a news provider; it's a newsroom that provides massive editorial impact, a lot of trust, and a huge amount of innovation in the way that they describe stories. And that's whether they're winning journalism awards or something I found out recently, which is one of the largest factual production providers in the UK, which is amazing. So I'd like to welcome up Tim and Bally, if you'd like to join me on stage. And we'll do some proper introductions shortly, but round of applause. Before I ask the guys to say hello, just to give you a little bit of context here, right? So I think it's fair to say that every single news organization is navigating quite a complex ecosystem at the minute, right? Audiences are fragmenting, attention is finite, and algorithms are driving a lot of what we see. And so that gives us some quite interesting topics and some quite interesting challenges for the future. And so what we're going to be doing is chatting through how we make sure that how we make sure that news is kept relevant, very resilient, and most importantly, trusted. So we're doing some microphone work. So I'm going to ask Tim and Bally to say hello and let the audience know what you do. So, Tim.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tim Forrest. I'm former program editor at ITV News. I'm moved up into management now, look after content delivery and commercial innovation.
Wow, thank you. Bally.
Hi, I'm Bally. So yes, I work in ITN in the corporate part of the organisation, looking at policy development and kind of, the corporate relations side of things and communications.
And you are both highly respected in your field, and so it's our thank you for being with us to talk about this pithy topic. So let's dive in. Firstly, TV news is actually doing quite well. I picked up some statistics out of the Ofcom report, and I think whilst there's been a little bit of a decline, there's still 50% of news audience is on TV. So, and actually that seems to be fairly stable actually from a UK perspective. But I'd like to ask the first question, get your views on how, obviously influencers today are increasingly where some audiences are going. And so I'd like to think about this from your perspective. So let's give us a sense, give us a view, get us into that boardroom and how you think about this. So should you be competing? Should you be collaborating or a counterbalance? Give us a sense of what this feels like for you guys.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I guess, like you said, ITN, it might not need an introduction, but just so that everybody's clear about our role in the news industry. So we are, a content powerhouse in the UK market because we've got the newsrooms for ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5 within the building. And each of those newsrooms have a different kind of approach to this new world that we are living in. And on that specific question around, influencers and creators, essentially, we've always been in favour of plurality. So lots of different voices and lots of different opinions are absolutely great. We welcome that. But there is a specific role for trusted eyewitness and particularly impartial journalism. And, we are very much in the kind of mode of being present where those influencers and creators are. And each of those newsrooms have their own strategies and perspectives on how they approach that development.
Perfect. So am I getting a sense of collaborating, or is there, what's that sense? Are you kind of just, you're watching? Like, how do you feel about that? Is it one of collaboration, or do you think it's more of a, we'll see how that goes?
There's certainly some collaboration, absolutely. And look, I think you have to understand that different audiences appreciate their news in different ways. Yeah. You were talking about the strength of linear broadcast news, and that's definitely there. But we do see that that's broadly an older audience. They like the person behind a desk sitting, looking directly at them and giving them the news. Younger audiences like something entirely different. It's important that our values are threaded through all our content, whether that's directed more at an older audience, at a mid-age audience, or a younger audience. So, of course, there's going to be a mix in wherever we take it forward.
Brilliant. So, maybe just as an extension to that, is there anybody out there that you kind of go, actually, they're doing it really well? Is there something, perhaps a company out there that you feel actually is doing a really good job of that?
In terms of news delivery, collaborating with influencers. Yeah. I think we're talking about apples and pears in a way, to be honest with you. I think the type of news that we deliver is based on facts. The UK market has a framework, a legislative framework, which is the public service broadcasting setup, which kind of, we have an imperative. We have to deliver things that are accurate and impartial. And that is our distinctive piece in the market. No influencer or creator really is operating in that way. So yes, of course, we will bring those voices in our kind of view of the world, of kind of representing what's going on out there. But that thing, for example, what's going on in the Middle East right now, those influencers and creators, they don't have that remit, they don't have that capacity to go out there and literally go to the source where that particular event is taking place, capture it, bring it back, digest it, and help audiences to understand what's going on in the world. So, of course, there's collaboration, but we know we have a distinct purpose for audiences.
As do they, by the way. It's really important that that's not us doing a disservice to what they're doing. It's really important that this is an ecosystem news and that this is accessible in different ways to different people. But some people come at news from a perspective of wanting to deliver their view on it, and that's healthy. Democracy demands that you have views. PSB demands that you call it as neutrally as you possibly can. And so, it's important that we all work together in that space.
Yeah, love that answer. Thank you. Let's move on. So, perhaps a slightly bigger issue or challenge, and this is really about in a world where perhaps truth can be shaped by personal brands, less maybe by evidence, and sometimes algorithms can amplify, certain, viral content over what's been verified. So I'd like to kind of ask you the question around going forward, like how do we think about verification? What new models of transparency do you think we need? And you live in a very fast-moving world, okay, instantaneous. How do we build those verification models into what we do in your world? Love to get your views on that.
Yeah, I'm interested that you start by using the word truth, because I want, and obviously a huge criticism that comes back on news is that, what is the truth? There is a difference between truth and trust. And it's important, as we go forward and talk about the technologies that we bring into that we understand that first. Because what we're seeking to do as a news organization is bring our audience with us on a trust journey. So they understand that we're doing all we can to get them as close to the truth as we can get. But often in this world where, as you say, events are incredibly fast-moving, they're often bombastic, international, you can't be in every place all the time, all at once. What you can do is get people close to the truth and handhold them with the trust of perhaps sourcing where things have come from, perhaps explaining to them better how it's come to be, and laying out when there are differences of opinion, differences of truth, who said what and who said counter to that.
Love that. So, in effect, you're not necessarily, obviously you'll take an editorial decision, but what you're doing is you're presenting fact, and you're allowing your audiences to take those facts on board, and they decide, yeah, okay. So what about that verification concept? Like your views on perhaps how we think about verification, or?
Yeah, I think, ultimately, if you look at the behaviour of so if you think about ITV News and Channel 4 News, Channel 4 News has been a front runner in kind of going digital first. It has a really big presence on YouTube and on other social platforms. ITV News is the same. So last year we achieved 7.2 billion hits online across all of ITN's kind of accounts. And the fastest growing platform was TikTok. And so what I think that demonstrates is there's editorial innovation, and the newsroom's capacity and willingness to kind of go direct to audiences and where they are and kind of reflect the habits that we know are kind of taking place in terms of consumption. But then I think there's another piece which is around technology and infrastructure, and ultimately we are going to have to get to a point where there's a standard where people are able to kind of verify for themselves kind of the information that they are receiving. So we are part of C2PA. We're actively taking part in those conversations. I'm not saying that's the only standard that's out there, but at the moment it's very prominent, and a lot of important players are engaged in that conversation. And so I think, those two things together, the editorial innovation of products plus the technological piece, is kind of where we're going to have to get to in terms of audiences being able to verify for themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think what we've realized is that for years, it has been enough for that trust to exist purely in the journalists and in the people taking the decisions, and the technology was the box in the corner. And where we've moved to now, as we all increasingly lean more and more heavily on our technology, is that trust piece has to exist in the technology itself. I'd say actually we're at the start of an industry of trust. That, let's think 20 years ago, probably people in the room here weren't spending as much on security as they are today. Well, here we stand now where we're handing more and more of the initiative into our technology. I would say we're at the beginning of an era now where our trust spend is about to begin to increase on our technology side.
Very interesting. So that's a sort of segue. So what I'm picking out from what you've just described is actually there are bodies which will provide some authenticity and legitimacy to, and you mentioned CTBA, to that concept of verification and authenticity. But you're describing now actually there's much more investment that we need to be making in that. So let's perhaps turn to that again. So, again, particularly in the UK, and this is testament to the way that our public service broadcasters approach news. We have an incredibly high level of trust, particularly in linear news, I have to say. And I think the stats are kind of calling out that about 79% of the UK public actually do trust. Okay, so that's good. But I want to kind of think about maybe how we think about trust, not as a sort of brand reputation score, but maybe an ongoing relationship. So how are you thinking about trust that something needs to be nurtured over time? How do we think about this? Give the audience maybe some perspectives.
Okay, let me give you an example of a picture that a lot of us hopefully or may have seen just recently of the French president on his plane about to get off, and very shortly before he does, out comes a massive hand and swipes him across the face.
We've all seen that.
We all think we've seen that, don't we?
Yeah.
The Elysee tried to claim that that was AI generated. Who do you trust? How can we prove as a broadcast organisation that that is genuine picture?
Fascinating.
We need an answer to that, don't we? And therein lies the need for us to begin to pick at this in a technological answer more than just saying, well, the journalist who was there saw it.
So are we measuring trust in the right way? Like, how do we think about this? What are the bold steps that perhaps we might need to make in terms of keeping trust, again, not just as a sort of, but a constant feature in the way that we engage with audiences?
I can't tell you who to trust or what to trust or what the measure of trust should be. You just know it, don't you? And if I say I am a British news organisation, you may have a different perspective to if I say I am a Chinese news organisation, I am a French news organisation. Like you may have a different perspective on that. So I'm not sure there's an exact metric that you can put on it to decide what trust looks like. But I think you can see the value, particularly for news, but actually I think it rubs out right the way across the industry for the need for your organisation to be trusted.
Brilliant. Okay. So that's effectively describing that sort of that legacy of trust, and then just effectively keeping that, utmost in your editorial principles and journalistic integrity. So, okay. Let's turn our attention perhaps a little bit more to the editorial aspect of this. So, as we mentioned, there are some parts of the audience, mainly younger demographics, who are spending a lot of their time on various platforms. How or should newsrooms adapt their editorial strategy to follow that attention? So that's a kind of a should and a how, or a how and a should. How do we think about, maybe engaging with some of the younger audiences?
Yeah, I think the newsrooms they're very alive to that. And as I kind of mentioned previously, they have kind of a lot of a presence on lots of different social media platforms. And I think it's that thing of recognizing, they are consuming content in a different way. A kind of a person behind a desk, as Tim was talking about, doesn't speak to them in the same way as somebody who kind of looks like them, speaks like them, is delivering content, which is literally, they live in that world. And it's about understanding the platforms and understanding what interests the audience, and kind of applying the same principles that you would to a package, which would appear on a TV bulletin, but in that space. So, for example, you know, and I actually think that it's an interesting question in the sense that you can't really take for granted what people are going to be interested in. So I think there's a narrative that maybe younger audiences aren't interested in serious subjects. And actually, our newsroom experience is that that's actually probably not the case. It's more about reiterating the format. So, you know, ITV News launched a politics TikTok account for the general election last year. It's seen exponential growth. And that's partly because of the people who are producing that content, partly because of the people that are appearing on screen, and partly because of the format. And, you know, that is where our newsrooms kind of have to really be thinking about what's the most appropriate way of conveying the same information that they would have done previously. The same for Channel 4 News. So on YouTube, for example, they have an average watch time of 7 minutes. Yep. And it's a younger skewing profile on YouTube as well. And so I think they're already kind of innovating for that type of behavior, audience behavior. And I also think, you know, going back to the question, that there is something that ITN has talked about for a long time, is that on those platforms, there should be a way of kind of making sure that news is discoverable. So, you know, conversations have been about prominence. Prominence is a term which is kind of associated with linear prominence, right? And actually maybe discoverability is more the type of conversation that people are gearing themselves up for right now.
I think Bally's absolutely right, that the newsrooms are adapting to editorially and in style. I think when we sort of move up the chain and we look at that challenge of reaching online audiences, I think the answer doesn't only lie in what newsrooms do, but I think it also depends on us as news organisations working really closely with the platforms that we serve, because it's no longer the case, as with linear TV, that we essentially own and host and run it from there, but we're sharing out to a much broader range of spaces. And we touched earlier on the C2PA work that we're involved in. C2PA, as sort of exists at the moment, is largely at the very start of the chain. It looks at where something is filmed and how it's first ingested, and it really can just identify that end of the chain. Obviously, there's a whole range of work that goes on in editing processes and in legal considerations and ethical considerations before a piece of journalism is ready to walk out the door. Yep. Where we've been focusing on C2PA, there's an IBC accelerator. If anyone's going in September, I would encourage you to come along, where we've been looking at stamping content out the door. Because we think that it's important to say, we stand behind this piece of content. We might not be able to show you everything upstream of it because, you know, for all the reasons I've just described, legal, ethical, editorial, that's just not appropriate. But we trust it, we stand behind it, and this is our piece of journalism, and you should take that on. That could be customer-facing, but it also could be platform-facing. And the conversations that I anticipate having going forward are around, to your point about discoverability, what that means when it's not just ITN, it's not just the BBC, but it's the whole news industry is able to take content and give it that stamp of approval.
So that's a very interesting concept in itself. So effectively what you're describing here is, and I love the concept of a stamp because that's industry. It can be industry facing. So there's a level of trust that provides. There's authenticity that goes with that as well. And actually, I love the concept there of you're tracking right the way through. So, you know, in a sense, there's some level of tangibility for a viewer to go, actually, yeah, if that stamp's on there, I can see it's not been tampered with, to your great example of the President Mitterrand, French president. You've got a really great example there of how you can build some authenticity right way through the workflow.
Look, ultimately, that's where we would hope to progress to. There's an awful lot of work to do from where C2PA is now at the beginning of the chain,
Sure.
where we're aiming at the end of the chain, and like a sort of channel tunnel style, digging towards each other and meeting so that eventually we've got that smooth progress.
Slightly tangential part to that question, though, is visibility, and you talked about discoverability and visibility, is that at odds at all with journalistic depth, or do you think the two can coincide? Do you think, I mean, you've described a very positive scenario there, but do you think those two are at odds at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we don't have sophisticated understanding of algorithms in this space, and we are talking to the platforms about getting deeper understanding of how their algorithms work. There are some platforms out there, for example, YouTube has a breaking news shelf. So if something big is happening, then the objective is to kind of get your news item on that breaking news shelf. But that's on their homepage, right? And so, yeah, I would, obviously, there are huge question marks about how algorithms work and the type of content that they're surfacing, and kind of how that relates to the public service remit that we're kind of working within. And I think there's kind of lots of conversations to be had around that. So you can have the conversations on the policy level, but also you need to be having those conversations with the platforms directly about kind of the value that you bring to their audiences and their users by having trusted, verified content available, easily available, that quality piece, which everybody is looking for. And that's going to become even more urgent with the advent of AI, kind of making, all types of content and information available to wide ranges of audience. I was in a conversation this morning, where the discussion was about a two-tier internet opening up. So, the bottom tier is like low quality information, and the top tier is like very, very high quality stuff. And actually, from the ITN perspective, our remit is public service. So we want to have, part of that is to kind of open up high quality information to as many people as possible. So yes, it's quite a complicated picture, and you're right to kind of question whether the newsrooms have to kind of think about how they serve the algorithm. But my point is that they shouldn't have to think about that. There's value in the way that they are producing content at the moment.
Discoverability is about reach.
Yeah.
Broadcasters was all about reaching as many people as you possibly can. So, of course, we're going to try and reach as many people as we possibly can. And furthermore, we're not here to make average news. We're here to try and make the best news possible that we want everybody to want to engage in. So, no, I think it absolutely tracks with everything that we're about.
And so maybe there's some people in the room here that can get their thinking caps on, because you're describing, actually, in some respects, an ever more complicated workflow to have trusted news across multiple platforms with a seal of approval out as quickly as you possibly can. I mean, that sounds to me like quite a broad industry challenge, actually, that we all need to start thinking about and leaning in. And boy, I guess you need some support with that. And let me just say to the audience, as Simon mentioned, we're going to have some time for some questions. So if anybody does have any question, please put your hand up, and someone will come along and give you a microphone, and you can ask the question to the panel. But let me just, before we go on to some more of that, but let me just ask you this one. So the UK this year probably is going to signal a sort of significant transition towards an IP future at some point in time. And I think very uniquely from at a country level, our government is saying we're not going to leave this up to kind of market forces. We want to kind of put some certainty into the market, which is fantastic. So from your perspective, and thinking about that sort of all IP future state. Two things. Do you have any views on what discoverability might look like in the future? And the second part to that is, give us a sense of your optimism about your role and the role of public service news, perhaps for the future.
So I guess, Tim's just nodding, you take this, okay. So I guess in terms of, I guess what we've got is a precedent for prominence and discoverability built into the system already. That's built around linear at the moment. We've had the Media Act introduced, which is about, PSBs as providers having prominence on certain platforms. And I guess the natural progression from that is thinking about what specific types of content, need prominence within that prominence which has been guaranteed, and what other spaces prominence is needed. Sorry, I've said prominence a million times there. And I think that is something that ITN has been aware of for a while, that there needs to be some granularity in kind of how you, and detail in how you approach that conversation. And so I guess, we are optimistic that I think a lot of people recognize that news is of deep value to audiences, and audiences themselves are engaging. Like I'm saying, 7.2 billion hits online last year across our online platforms, and projected to grow this year significantly. But I guess, it goes back to that trust piece, that there's only so much that people kind of want to be told that this is good. We have to meet them halfway. And that's about the editorial innovation as well, and recognizing that trust structures in society are changing quite a lot, and kind of top-down isn't necessarily always going to deliver the message that's needed, and kind of being immersed in those worlds and thinking about trust as a distributed concept is really important to getting those messages right.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Vali. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future, that we can look towards, organizations like ITN and the public service broadcasters to make sure that we do get trusted news. Tim, were you going to comment on that?
Happy to. Look, we are clearly in a really transitional phase at the moment. Everything this morning that we heard people talking about, this is not a time when people are making slight adjustments. They're making really big adjustments. I mean, there's huge opportunity in that. It's really important that news is considered as part of that, and understood perhaps differently to the way that it was once understood. We're coming out of a world where, okay, not public service broadcasting, but newspapers are now digital publishers, or are they digital video providers? I mean, what is that offering, and how does that differentiate from television news programs that are now digital news programs that are now, well, is that the same or is that different? I mean, as Bally says, there are clear differences, but over time, what does that look like? Am I optimistic? Absolutely. Are we going to be sitting here in 20 years' time and saying, well, that was the end of the news? I don't think so. I think we're going to have gone through a real period of deciding what this looks like going forward. But then I do believe that news will emerge out of this. I do believe that there is a big market underneath news, actually. And I don't believe, to Bally's point, that should only be for the rich. I think that does exist across society, and it's just us taking that confidence forward and working out how to realize that properly.
Brilliant. Thank you both for your very candid, open and positive comments. I'm going to open up to the audience. Do we have any burning questions? Tim, you made a comment to me to say that actually news can be quite daunting if you don't work in the industry, and I agree. So if anybody has any sort of burning questions for our panelists, then please put your hand up and ask now or forever hold your peace. We've stunned them all into...
Hello. Sorry, I have a question here. It's in the back. There's a lot of discussion around like news media organizations moving towards video for distribution across many channels, social being a really prominent channel within that. There's been a lot of sort of discourse around social creating echo chambers and reinforcing divisions. I'm just interested in your perspectives around discoverability and prominence and how that sort of doesn't contribute to those echo chambers and divisions and more stands out aside from those.
I think it's a great question because, look, as Bali says, we have regular discussions with those platforms on which some of those echo chambers exist. Ultimately, we don't control those algorithms. And it is really important that people understand that news is not there just to be a reinforcement or, you know, a spiraling of a view that may take you into difficult or dangerous places. You know, it is really important that people understand that it's not just about the individual report, but it's about that whole tapestry of news that you are receiving. And that is, you're completely right, a challenge across the industry, and it isn't one that we or any individual news organization can wholly fix. But 100%, we take it completely seriously and totally engage in those conversations and want to work with any organization that wants to bring us to a place where we're receiving news in a well-reasoned and positive way.
Anything to add to that?
No. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
No worries. Any more questions? Is there another one coming? Did I see? There's a finger being pointed over there somewhere.
Hello. Yeah, for me, one of the things that's quite interesting as a trend at the moment is people are steering away from like traditional media sources and using sort of like influencers or people that they perceive that they share values with to take news from them. I don't know whether the kind of AI deepfake thing is like smeared all big corporations and under the same brush, so people are turning to individual people to get their news sources and their opinions from. I don't know if that's like part of the strategy in terms of building trust that ITN and other companies need to combat that, or what the perception is of that kind of growing trend.
Yeah, I think that is definitely part of the strategy, recognizing that influencers have a lot of, it's that thing, that's the real life example of top-down. Trust is changing and people want that direct relationship with the people that are giving them information, but we just need to take into account, so we've always had reporters, so they have their profiles on social media, etc., and just need to take into account that those influencers, if something's going on in Liverpool, for example, they're not going to be compelled, they don't have the same kind of view of the world that they have to go and find out what's going on and establish the facts. So, yes, there's a place for them, but the type of work that our newsrooms are doing, there's always going to be a need for it. And actually, do we kind of translate that so that we have an organization delivering the news and that we have trusted faces? It's moving that model of reporters that are known on screen into a different environment is part of the strategy, 100%.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bali. We're up on time, so I want to do two things. So I've heard there's some very optimistic narrative for news, which is perfect. I mean, we're doing really well. We're going to keep going. Picked up on the point around measurement and actually having potentially an industry stamp for trust, which is great, and editorial integrity. Which is the cornerstone of public service broadcast news. So thank you both for your time. Please put your hands together for our panelists.
Fantastic. Very good, very good. Right, straight into the next session. Big topic. Big topic is convergence. Enormous topic. Lots we can cover in convergence. So to address that, we're going to get straight into it. It's my pleasure to introduce Jeff from AWS. So Jeff, please start your session. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Simon and Ian. They told me they really haven't had anyone across the pond come over and do this before, and now I realize they weren't kidding. I think they kept me at the 2 o'clock hour just to keep everyone on their toes and not falling asleep. So thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. We have a really incredible panel, I think, today for you to talk about this topic. Overall, it's a really great technology and industry leaders. And we're really going to go into, talk about like the innovative and creative and redefined content consumption really for that next generation, what that means. We heard a lot about that this morning, what beyond broadcast means. I think this is some really innovative things that we'll discuss today and some really innovative companies. So with that, I'll introduce to the stage Aman Akram, a CTO of Untold Studios. Awesome. Can't wait to talk through some of that with you today. And thank you for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce Adam Holmes, Developer Strategy Lead at Meta.
Time can make you change your mind. Can make you laugh, can make you cry. Girl, will you ever be mine?
Awesome. Thank you both for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you. Really look forward to kind of talking through this session a little bit and really diving deep into some of those topics I think Samir helped us cover this morning. So, the first of those is really this change in consumer behavior. We've talked about younger audiences, and we've heard it throughout the panel, but really diving into that, what that means and some of these really advanced digital channels as we're seeing streaming obviously start to come in and supplement the linear speed, live events, sports, news that we just talked about. So really going deep into that and uncovering how some of this convergence of technology, which is the second piece, starts to come together and really bring that to fruition. So it's the synergy of cloud computing, generative AI, the AWS's specific media and games services. I know Adam works a lot in games, so we can talk a little bit about that as well. And we're really then witnessing that in stuff like Aman created in that amazing reel right there through Untold Studios, and really innovating in the cloud and accelerating their creators with generative AI. Third area is really just that immersive, which may be overused, but is really that personalized and unique ways to deliver that content to individuals. How are people wanting to consume their content? How is that going to change? What does that look like? And Meta is hosting concerts live in the digital world. You've got live sports, sitting courtside at NBA games. It's amazing to be a part of those, so we'll get to talk through some of that. And finally, just thinking about the IP that these creative studios and organizations have, and really how to proliferate that across a bunch of mediums and really start to have that first-party data converge, and then track and be able to really monetize that throughout the entire thing. So these disruptions are really awesome opportunities and challenges, and we'll talk through some of that today with the panel here today, and talking about what they're doing and really how they're making great content out of that and what that looks like. So thanks for being here today. Maybe Adam, I'll start with you, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your role at Meta and what you do there.
Yeah, for sure. Hey everyone, I'm Adam. I've spent my career so far working with developers to build businesses with emerging tech. So I started in mobile gaming, moved to support mobile app developers, And then I've been spending a bulk of time in the XR space, which we'll talk a little bit more about today. Yeah, I've been at Meta 5.5 years. The last 3 years of those have been in Reality Labs, which is the side of our business focused on, amongst other things, MetaQuest, which is our VR and MR headset that we saw in the VT a moment ago, and Horizon Worlds, which is our virtual world. So within Reality Labs, I focus on entertainment content, and we basically structure our team to support sports, music, and film and TV use cases. And we'll talk through some examples, I hope, on the panel as well. And yeah, a lot of the developers I support are partners of AWS. A lot of the studios I work with are partners of AWS. So really excited to be here. And Jeff, thanks for the invitation.
It's awesome to have you. Thank you. And speaking of one of those studios, I'd like to have Amin tell you a little bit about Untold and himself. So thank you for being here today, Amin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for the invitation. Hi, everyone. I work at Untold Studios as their Chief Technology Officer. I've been in the industry of visual effects for more than 25 years. Some people tell me to stop counting because it's at some point it just all amalgamates into like, okay, you've been there for a while. But I've seen the industry come together in the early 90s when it was very loosely defined. It was very cutting edge at the moment, still is today. At Untold, I work across creative as well as technology, so I help empower artists with creative technology. How do we roll that out to projects? How do we make that approachable? How do we explain some complicated concepts and make them simple? Also engage with clients in terms of talking about, okay, how do we bring certain, how do we shoot certain things? How do we bring technology into some of the new projects that they're trying to do? So over my long career of 25 years, I've worked as a software developer as well, so to have open source software. So that's just not beneficial to me, and the stuff that I learn, I make it available sometimes to our studios and to the wider community, so which makes it very easy for me to connect and make connections and figure out, okay, what's happening across the wider world, because people are sometimes using the software that I've written, and some of that goes back 15, 20 years. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here today. And I think it's one of those, you're one of those amazing people who's crossing creative and a technologist, which is super rare. I always have always admired creatives in my life. So it's amazing to see people like you cross it. So maybe diving deep into that, you mentioned 25 years, and it's been a long time. You don't give time. I'm going to give another time frame, which is, I think, I don't know if the audience is aware, but you made a really bold move in 2018, and I think. Honestly, one of the first virtual effects studios to be fully cloud-based. And so I'm curious to learn a little bit from you, how that transformation enabled you to redefine content creation across your global teams and, produce some incredible shows from, The Crown to Mission Impossible.
It's been hugely transformational for us. It started out with a vision of, okay, we don't want to work with the problems of figuring out what machine types do we need, and then when you have a machine, you're stuck with it for 3 years, but you're stuck with it because you've bought 100 of them, so you can't replace them very quickly. And so that some of your time goes into figuring out those problems, but you're in the business of visual effects, and you want to make images, so you'd much rather not deal with that problem. And so that's where the cloud comes in, and it offers us the ability to be able to pick and choose the types of machines that we need, but also more importantly, as a business, we want to work with creatives, and the creatives may not be geographically near to you. So sometimes you just need to go to wherever you can find talent. So our outreach has massively expanded by being in the cloud. So, sometimes we just find talent that is, we're working with somebody in New Zealand who was doing water simulation for us, and he would surf in the morning and then come and do water simulation for us in the evening. So Anton was brilliant to work with. But the fact that we were in the cloud, we were able to seek out talent that we needed and said, we will come to you with our cloud technology. And that's been hugely transformational. There has also been a social impact of this, which is that sometimes people needed to leave their countries to go and do the work because the work existed in certain parts of the globe. So you're leaving friends and family behind, and then you work somewhere for 10, 15 years, and then you go back. What we're able to do with the cloud is we will go, okay, where do you want to work? Are you happy where you're working? We'll bring our technology to you. So it's on multiple angles, it's been hugely transformational for us, both in terms of the quality of the output that we produce, because we're not tied into, we bought this machine and we're locked into it for 3 years. There was a clip back there of the Aberfan disaster, and that was done very early on in 2018 when Untold was started. And computationally, we needed a lot of compute power. And so the only reason we were able to do it was we asked the artists, how much compute power do you need? And they said, well, to do this amount of mountain sliding down, this amount of debris that's happening, we need such compute power. And then we talked to AWS and we said, okay, we can provision that for you so you can remain creative and you can remain in that creative cycle. So hugely transformational for us.
Those are amazing examples, I think, across. And I think I want a new role in New Zealand, surfing and working for you. But we'll see if maybe after this show. But to that point of being creative and just finding creatives in the place where it is, and then removing the technology barrier. I think that's hugely impactful. So for Adam, for example, I don't know if people are aware, but you're working with really amazing creatives. So James Cameron started Lightstorm Studio within Meta. You've been working with the NBA, NBC Universal, and really you're just helping them bring their content into new immersive formats. Tell me a little bit about those immersive formats and how you're helping some of these companies that are traditional or not bring that content into something we saw in your video where it's like I can be in a waiting room and all of a sudden transform this entire room in front of my face.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that framing around focusing on creative over technology too. It's something we try and do across basically every project that we work on as well. So, generally working with these guys, we have to kind of define immersive up front because everyone has a slightly different definition of what immersive means. I'm sure if I asked anyone in the room, you'd each say something slightly different. I've actually had a few chats today where we've all talked about it from different angles. So, for Meta, we kind of see immersive as 180-degree and 360-degree video. So we often use that term immersive video to cover that. But really, we see a breadth of formats as well. So we are able to support 2D panels, which you saw in the Netflix experience, where you can take any browser site or any Android app and blow it up onto a massive screen. We support mixed reality experiences where there's like 3D objects in your physical space, all the way to like a fully virtual environment as well, using like CG environments and game engines and things like that. So with each of the partners that we mentioned here, we're approaching this from different angles, really, around how do we create something that's very different to what you can have on TV and on your phone, but really simplify it for them as well. So one of the reasons we're so excited about the James Cameron partnership that you mentioned is, and for those who haven't seen, we recently announced we're partnering with Lightstorm Vision, which is James Cameron's who's the godfather of stereoscopic video. I'm sure I don't have to explain that to the audience, but stereoscopic video consumers know as 3D films and movies. And really, there's this tidbit that he always talks about, which is that there's only 150 cinemas worldwide that are set up to deliver 3D movies optimally. So that means a lot of us, when we went to see 3D movies, we actually weren't getting that perfect kind of 3D effect. The lighting wasn't necessarily right, and it was quite underwhelming for a lot of people. So that partnership is all around how do we make it easier for traditional TV production workflows and movie production workflows to drop stereoscopic video into their existing production flows. And that's something we'll be talking a lot about as a company over the next kind of 12 months. And why we're so bullish on that is that we think that if we increase the supply, then we actually have a great destination to watch that type of content in headset. Because on Quest, we have a 4K display. We're sending a separate video feed to each eye. So you're having a super high definition feed delivered to each eye. We can control the lighting, and yeah, we can create a perfect, like we think, 3D movie viewing experience. So that's one of the ways we're working with James Cameron and hopefully the wider ecosystem is to make it really simple for people to do that type of thing. And then some of the other partners you mentioned, we're exploring other ways of collaborating. So we've built a bunch of piping and tooling to make it very easy to launch things across Quest. In Horizon Worlds, for example, we launched the Blumhouse Horrorverse a couple of weeks ago in Horizon Worlds, which is a space for fans of the Blumhouse IP and movies to come together, and you can play mini games and watch content, and it's awesome. But then we're also looking at just having 2D panel apps streaming at 4K, and it looks amazing. You can blow it up to a 100-foot screen like we saw in the VT. You can dim the lighting. We have spatial audio support now with Dolby Atmos. So yeah, there's a whole spectrum of experiences we're doing with partners. But really the theme is that we want to create something different that you can't do on TV and phone that might warrant putting the headset on, but making it easy to create that type of content.
That's awesome. And maybe just to engage the audience a little bit, I like to do this every time because I'm kind of curious. How many people have tried a Meta Quest or Apple Vision Pro just in the audience? Raise of hands. It's getting more and more over time. I mean, it seems kind of like space-like at least to me sometimes. I was telling Adam this morning that mixed reality is one of those things that have started to like dawn and flip the switch for me of, oh, wait a second, I can be in this room, I can be present, but I can overlay and I can make a 100-foot screen or 30 of them, I don't care. So as we think about like the opportunities and beyond broadcast to bring a bunch of content to folks, I think these devices will mature over time. I think there's a lot of maturing left to do, but it's something that we're thinking about in the future, and obviously it becomes really impactful when you have great companies like Meta creating really cool content with folks like James Cameron on that as well. Thinking about like that content and across mediums, I'd be curious, Amin, on your side, you've worked across a ton of mediums, right? So feature films, commercials, you've integrated, game engines into your development like Unreal Engine. How do you see these different platforms and technologies converging to create new storytelling or visual effects opportunities?
We see convergence as things converge and then things diverge. So it's a continuously moving topic. Game engines, we use them as a tool. So we talk to clients about what message do you want to give out? What's the core of the content that you're trying to produce? And sometimes with that, obviously if it's a feature film, it goes on the screen. But from that, there are other deliverables. And the way we approach it is just to figure out, okay, do we use like game engines as a tool or game engines as a delivery content or as a delivery method? And that's how it's changing for us. The amount of deliverables that we create has gone up massively. And it's just not on one particular medium, it's on multiple mediums. And also to the point of convergence, it's just something that has been happening continuously in the world of visual effects. And if I go back to, let's say, the early 90s, or even the late 90s, we couldn't simulate fire. And fire is just some of those essential elements. You want to do explosions, you want to do magical effects. We couldn't simulate it. We had no mathematical and simulation foundation there. The solution came from meteorology when somebody looked at beyond visual effects and how do we solve this? Oh, suddenly it's already a solved problem, but we weren't looking there. So convergence starts very early on. Ocean simulations also happened in a very similar way, where when Titanic was being made, they wanted to create oceans, but they didn't know how to do it. The solution came from weather data that had been collected entirely differently in the 50s and the 60s, using buoys in oceans and how they would float up and down. So there's always been convergence from different industries coming in, and then people who are driving and pushing innovation are looking elsewhere. What can we pull into the work that we're doing today? And so that's where, even today, we're looking at game engines, we're looking at virtual production. There's continuous convergence happening. So it's for us, it's a moving target continuously, and the only way that you can own the narrative in that space is to be on the frontier of, okay, what can we do differently? What's happening? What are the trends that are out there? What more information can we pull from different parts of the segment? And Untold Studios is, our CEO says that yes, you can create content, but if you can impact culture, that is where your true values lie. And your true values, or you start to create true value. And we're in the world of music videos, we're in the world of documentaries, production, post-production, so we're really spread across a huge spectrum, trying to pull in as much experience as we can to produce the content that we need to produce.
That's an awesome answer, and it's funny. Like I feel like we talked a lot, and I even learned things on stage, like about the weather and how that increased. It was enabled you to model water, and I think like you talked about the culture, and then just really pulling all these elements together in a unique way is something that poses a question, I think, for Adam, and obviously like. The social aspect of Meta is where it started, right? With Facebook and that social connection to everyone else. So, whether it's co-watching sports live or attending virtual contents together, I think, until this time, it's almost been a one-on-one relationship with the content where I get to do it, or I get to sit in a movie theater with other people, but it's a little bit different. I'm curious, what content creators and studios, in your opinion, should start to think about or have top of mind when they start to think about that social layer that you enable as you create some of those like immersive experiences where it's not just a one-to-one relationship?
Yeah, so social's super important to Meta. We're a social technology company, and so we design all of our experiences with social in mind. One of the places we do that at the moment is in Horizon Worlds, which is our virtual world. So the idea really is you can meet up with friends, meet up with other people, and travel a lot of different worlds together. So yeah, we're seeing young audiences now is the fastest growing segment on MetaQuest, and that they're spending a bulk of their time now in Horizon Worlds. So they love this social VR kind of element to the experience. So as an entertainment team, we're designing all our experiences in Horizon Worlds around this. We've started to learn that young audiences want more than just watching a piece of content. They want to actually interact with the either sports league or musician. They want to interact with other fans in that universe. We create pre and post show hangout spaces for them as well. And they want to be able to purchase digital goods. So they want more than just to be able to watch like a piece of video content, really. So a couple of recent examples that our team have worked on. You mentioned VR concerts earlier, and we also saw in the keynote the Snoop Dogg example with Fortnite, which is awesome. So we're doing very similar, but in the VR space. So we had an exclusive VR concert with Sabrina Carpenter last year, just as she had done Coachella, so the timing was like amazing. We had Charlie XCX as well over Christmas. I didn't know who she was, if I'm honest, but that did incredibly well on Horizon Worlds as well. And yeah, we're designing these spaces for fans to come together, watch the content, buy some digital merch, and yeah, make it more than just the kind of video content itself. We do the same with NBA Arena, so we stream 52 live matches a season into NBA Arena, which is one of our worlds. And it's also complete with mini games that you can play, and there's avatar skins you can unlock as well. So yeah, doing a lot of thinking about how do we extend things beyond just the screen and create completely new fan experiences that are social in nature. And we're definitely seeing that next generation, they want to do that in digital spaces. They expect to be able to just invite their friends to join them. And yeah, they don't really want to be watching content on their own in these digital formats as much. So that's a trend we're seeing.
And it's amazing. I remember like watching, those concerts and being, I've been in Red Rocks because I live in Colorado, and then I went to Red Rocks virtually, and it was really close, like if not like the same. It felt that experience, and then having that social aspect was amazing. Yeah, really cool content. If you haven't watched it, super suggest to go do that. Maybe switching gears, obviously, I have to ask generative AI questions. And so I'm kind of curious. I mean, and Amin, I'll ask you to start, but I know you started to pioneer with this a little bit and integrate Gen AI into your business. You maintained, security and control, and I find this really impressive because we talked about the creative element and really how important that is and where your creatives are in the world. And so I'm really curious how you see AI transforming visual effects workflows, and what challenges have to be addressed to make sure you protect that, the client data, you protect that artist quality, and really you don't compromise on the creativity.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways and threads to pull from what do you want to do in generative AI. We've obviously been looking at it for a number of years now. It's not new to Untold Studios, but there are continuous questions around it, like how do we make sure that we're using it in a way that is beneficial for our clients in terms of, or from a security perspective. So interestingly, when we launched Untold Studios, we were struggling to get compliance certification from Disney, Paramount, etc., because they're so careful about how do you control their data. And then generative AI comes in and goes, oh, we're going to send your data out of the studio. Actually, no, we're not going to do that. So we're going to try and retain that within AWS Bedrock, which allows us to keep control over security, so we don't leak any data into a foundation model. But then, there are like you can build a technology conversation around it. The conversation for us is more important in the areas of should we, when should we, how should we? That's a continuous question. There are questions around the ethics of the models that you're using. Where did the data come from? Clients are very aware of this, and they keep asking us, so how are you going to stop our data leaking into foundation models? And we go, okay, if you must use a foundation model, then here are the ways that you can stop it from leaking data into a foundation model. We just played back a video there of Virgin Media with a goat on a glider, and we did that a couple of years ago. It's an award-winning commercial for us, and a new foundation model came out, and somebody was able to, at our workplace, just prompt their way into exactly the same visual. And we were all a little bit like, okay, so how easy is it to recreate? But then at the same time, we're not in the recreating business. We're in the business of creating stuff. That's where the game is for us. Also, there are questions around creative control and creative empowerment. At the core of our business, even before generative AI, we've always said creative control is non-negotiable. We work with clients who are so specific in what they want. Like we will sometimes do, 20 versions, 30 versions of one shot, which will be 2 seconds, and that will contain, 48, 50 images in those 2 seconds. And sometimes the changes we put in are not on the images, but are in between those images. And so that's the level of creative control that we offer. And that, in turn, creates a very interactive dialogue with our clients. We can't go to clients and say, okay, we've got generative AI that sometimes will work and sometimes will not work. That's not us. Going back to the water example, even though we've been able to now simulate water and fire, we can't say, oh, it behaves that way because it's embedded in physics. That's not the world that we live in. So we always need to bend things around to creative conversation. And so it's an area that we're looking at very, very carefully. And there are obvious benefits, but then there are obviously concerns around how do we use it. We want to make sure that it empowers our creatives to do things that they weren't able to do before. It's a creative unblocker in certain points in time, or those who are programming. Sometimes it can generate code that would be beneficial for you to get off the ground and allow you to focus on the real core of the problem and not how do I get started type of problems. So we're looking into it, and the only way that you can form a narrative around it and lead is to be deeply immersed in it. And that's where we are at the moment. We're not saying we are a generative AI studio. That's not our goal. We are a creative studio. And so for us, Gen AI is a tool, but with a lot of question marks around it currently.
No, it's awesome to hear, because I think, we've talked about you multiple times. You're like, yeah, it's just a tool. And I think it's one of those tools, and you talked about how it's empowering creatives to move faster. It's empowering developers to move faster and really start to take that creative element, or that knowledge element we were talking earlier with a couple folks about, like how it impacts their speed, into code, and just really drive that forward. So that's awesome to see. Maybe last question, because I think it's also interesting, and it comes with that, like, how do we do stuff in a new environment, Adam? And it's really about pushing boundaries. And you talked about, a concept you have with space explorers, and even in, one of the videos that I don't think we show, but is you have this like multiple interactive elements. And so it's everything from like Xstadium, being in Stadium and having multi-streams where you can start to pick and choose, or Space Explorers, which I think is coming out soon, where you have this interactive space activity. How do you see this convergence of this like passive or lean back and lean entertainment forms, reshaping the audience expectations or creating new opportunities for people creating media?
Yeah, so we've been experimenting in this space for a little while now, probably since the Oculus days when we were formerly Oculus. We've been exploring different ways of delivering media and entertainment type content. There's a few bits we're leaning into and doing more of, and one is, you mentioned Xstadium there, so really we're seeing that people like to personalize their experience, their viewing experience, especially sports fans. So Xstadium is an app that we work really closely with. You can watch sports content, watch live matches, video on demand content, and we've basically created two modes for this. So one is we call it the director mode, and you can have 9 different feeds at once that you can watch simultaneously. And this is for like your mega kind of sports fan or sports nerd that wants to have their data feed there, social feed. They want to see 4 or 5 different camera angles at once. Maybe they actually want to have 2 or 3 matches that they're live streaming at once. So that's what that mode is for, and we're catering to that like dedicated fan with that. But on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing some sports fans, they want to get as close to the action as possible and remove everything else. And that's where we have this, you mentioned courtside view earlier on, and that's how we're kind of framing it for NBA, but it equally works for other sports where you'll position the camera right at the front, and it's in 180 degrees, so you can see across it, and we're delivering that at 8K stereoscopic video, so this is actually 3D as well. So it's really impressive, and a lot of fans are enjoying having that distraction-free view as well. So that's one of the areas we're leaning into. The second is the interactivity piece that you mentioned with Space Explorers. But really we're seeing that people put on a Quest headset. They want to have something completely different to what they can do in other environments. And we've been able to tap into a lot of the kind of CG environments or VFX environments that have been created and start to use those in a VR setting. And one day we'd love to use some of the environments that Untold are working on, and how do we bring those to life in VR? But our audience want to be able to explore those spaces. They want to be able to walk around it, like pick up props and assets from the TV show and film show. And we're just like scratching the surface of what we can do there. A recent example of a project along those lines was last year we worked with Aardman, Atlas V and No Ghost with a development studio. And we launched Wallace and Gromit, The Grand Getaway on Quest. And this was all built in Unreal game engine. And they used 3D scans of the actual models and assets from the TV series and shows and brought those to life in VR, and that kind of kick-started their the VR experience. And you can step into environments from the show, basically. So that's one way that we're looking at interactivity for that like die-hard audience that want to experience their favorite entertainment IP or brand in a different way. And we'd love to see more of that convergence of like how do we take some of those VFX assets and reimagine them in VR and let people play around in them.
This has been so cool. Hopefully you all enjoyed the panel today. I know I did. I continue to always learn a ton from you both. I know we asked about questions, but I know we're also right in front of a coffee networking break, which everyone super values. So I'm going to flip it. We're going to be around. We'll definitely be around in the coffee networking break. Please, come please talk to Amin. Please come talk to Adam. Thank you both for being here today. It was incredible and appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.